Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker and a little stickier. Not the kind of glamorous WW2 story you see in movies, but the kind that starts with sweat, salt water, and a deep appreciation for rainstorms. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these calm, deep dives into the overlooked corners of history. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing who's out there drifting off to the sound of rusted rifles and tropical rain. Now dim the lights, maybe get a little water yourself, and let's ease into tonight's story together. It's June 30th, 1943. The island of New Georgia, part of the Solomon Islands chain, is quiet, or at least it was, before hundreds of Marines came ashore in landing craft that smell like diesel, sweat, and nervous anticipation. You're one of them, part of the 1st Marine Division, carrying 70 pounds of gear and the creeping suspicion that paradise is overrated. The water looks inviting, bright blue, warm, endless, but it's deceptive. Every step inland takes you into thicker jungle, where the air feels like soup and everything alive wants to bite you. You haven't even unpacked your rifle yet, and you're already soaked. The humidity doesn't care about rank or courage. It just coats you in a permanent layer of damp regret. The first order of business is setting up camp. The second is figuring out how not to smell like a biology experiment gone wrong. There's no freshwater stream nearby. The wells are shallow and contaminated, so you and your buddies turn to the one thing you have plenty of: the ocean. Salt water becomes the solution to everything. Washing, shaving, even brushing teeth if you're desperate. Some of the guys try to joke about it.
It's like a spa day, one Marine says, as he dumps a helmet full of seawater over his head.
Of course, he forgets that salt and open bug bites are not friends. The joke ends about 10 seconds later. Bathing becomes both a necessity and a form of group entertainment. You wait until the sun dips behind the palms, then walk down to the waterline in groups of 4 or 5, rifles slung nearby just in case. You wade into the shallows, soap bar in hand, though soap might be too generous a word. It's standard issue military lye soap, shaped like a brick, and it behaves exactly like one in seawater.
It doesn't lather.
It just smears. Still, you go through the motions. Scrub, dunk, repeat. The Pacific stretches out in front of you like an endless bathtub, and for a few minutes, it's not half bad. The salt stings, but at least it's water, and that counts for something out here. You quickly learn that staying clean isn't about vanity.
It's about survival.
The humidity breeds everything: bacteria, fungus, insects, and they love skin folds, socks, and uniforms that never fully dry. Jungle rot sounds almost quaint, but it's not. It starts as an itch, then a rash, then skin just dissolves. Some guys end up with infections that put them out of action faster than any sniper. The medics do their best, but they're swamped. The order from command is simple: keep clean, however you can, which is easy to write on paper and nearly impossible to do in real life. Fresh water is for drinking, not bathing. Rain barrels are reserved for cooking. That leaves seawater and whatever creative systems you can invent. Improvisation becomes the island's unofficial pastime. Someone rigs an old oil drum as a shower tank, punching holes in the bottom and hoisting it onto bamboo poles. Another guy uses a tin can and a rope to make a kind of hand-pumped shower. It's crude, but it works. For about 5 minutes, until the water runs out. Every Marine has his own method. Some scoop seawater with helmets and pour it over their heads. Others line up in the rain, soap at the ready, waiting for clouds to open up. There's even one inventive soul who builds a solar shower by painting a drum black and letting it sit in the sun all day. By evening, it's hot enough to feel luxurious like a tropical spa, if the spa also came with malaria and sand fleas. You can hear laughter echoing through the trees on nights like that, because what else can you do? Out here, humor is the last line of defense against madness. The men start calling the Pacific Hotel H2O, the bathhouse Room with a View. One guy even nails a sign to a palm tree: complimentary showers, bring your own fresh water. Still, not everything is funny. The salt leaves your skin cracked and dry. Your uniform stiffens overnight like cardboard. Mosquitoes swarm constantly and repellent barely works. A single night without netting can mean a week of scratching and cursing. Malaria pills help, but not enough. You start to smell like a mix of sweat, salt, and bug spray.
Everyone does.
After a while, nobody notices. What you do notice is how fast time blurs together. Days melt into one another, each one hot, sticky, and strangely timeless. You wake at dawn, drenched in humidity. You work, you patrol, you eat something that might be spam, and then you bathe or try to. The ocean becomes a routine, a kind of ritual. Step in, scrub, complain, repeat. There's something oddly peaceful about it, though. Standing in the shallows, waves lapping at your knees, staring at a horizon that never ends. You can almost forget you're at war. For those few minutes, you're just a human being trying to feel human again. At night, when the wind dies down and the jungle starts humming, the air smells of salt and smoke and damp canvas. The camp is quiet except for the low murmur of conversation and the occasional thump of someone filling a water drum. The stars are impossibly bright, scattered like silver dust. It's beautiful, in a way that almost feels wrong. You lie on your cot, feeling the salt still on your skin, and think about how something as simple as a shower can become a dream. Back home, you'd never think twice about turning a faucet. Out here, you'd trade your rifle for one. The officers talk about morale a lot, keeping spirits up, maintaining discipline, making sure hygiene doesn't slip. But hygiene is a strange word here. It means washing your socks in a helmet, scrubbing your feet with a rag, checking your body for infections. It means caring enough to stay alive one more week. Some Marines write about it later in their letters. They joke that they've become salt-cured, like ham. One wrote home, "I think my pores now excrete seawater." Another said, "If I ever see a bar of soap again that actually bubbles, I might cry." There's truth behind the humor. The small, miserable routines of staying clean become symbols of endurance, quiet proof that they still care about living through another day. One night, after a particularly brutal patrol, you and a few others drag yourselves back to camp. Your uniforms are stiff with salt and mud. You can't even tell what color they used to be. The air is thick, unmoving. You're exhausted beyond caring. Then someone notices clouds gathering to the east, dark, heavy, promising, and then it happens. The first fat raindrops hit the ground, sizzling on the hot sand. Within minutes it's pouring, buckets of water from the heavens, clean and cold and endless. Without a word, helmets fly off, shirts come off, boots are kicked aside. You stand there, head tilted back, laughing like a child.
Everyone does. For the first time in weeks, you're rinsing off with real fresh water.
The soap lathers, actual white foam instead of grey scum. It's glorious. You can hear the shouts of joy across the camp, echoing through the palms. Some men start singing. Others just stand there in silence, eyes closed, feeling clean for the first time since they landed. The rain doesn't last long, it never does. But for those few minutes, it feels like salvation. When it stops, you're soaked, grinning, and strangely lighter. You towel off with whatever's dry, crawl into your damp cot, and listen to the last drips of rain tapping the canvas overhead. And for once, the sound isn't annoying. It's comforting. What none of you realize yet is that this was the easy part. Bathing in the ocean is simple compared to what's coming, because soon the rains won't be occasional relief, they'll be constant. The camp will flood, the ground will turn to soup, and staying clean will mean something entirely different. But for now, in that brief calm between storms, you fall asleep smelling faintly of soap and seawater, the jungle humming quietly outside your tent, and, for the first time in a long while, you actually feel human again. So let's pick up where we left off. The rain has stopped. The ground is steaming. The saltwater routine begins again. Morning on New Georgia doesn't really begin. It just reheats. By 6 a.m., the air already feels like it's been simmering overnight. You wake up sticky, crusted with dried salt from the last ocean bath, your uniform as stiff as if it had been dipped in starch. You stretch, yawn, and wonder somewhat seriously if this is what being marinated feels like. The ocean is calling again, not in a poetic way, but in a please, for everyone's sake, go wash kind of way. Most Marines head down after patrols or before evening chow. It's never an official order, but the smell of a day's worth of sweat, gun oil and jungle mud makes it a strong suggestion. The favorite spot is just past the coral line. The reef breaks the waves, leaving a patch of shallow, calm water that's perfect for bathing if you ignore the occasional reminder that you're not alone out there. Every so often, someone spots a fin or a shadow moving a little too smoothly beneath the surface. Sharks love reefs, and so apparently do marines who enjoy poor life choices. That's why they bathe in pairs or groups, the unofficial buddy system. One guy scrubs while the other keeps watch. If that sounds excessive, it's worth noting that the Pacific had more shark incidents than the entire Atlantic war zone combined. The Marines knew the risks, but the feeling of cool water after 12 hours in the jungle, worth it. Soap rationing becomes an art form. The quartermaster hands out bars that look like they were carved from cement. Officially, you're supposed to get 1 bar a week. Unofficially, you learn to shave off thin slivers, use 1 per wash, and guard the rest like treasure. There are rumors that some guys trade soap for cigarettes, others for coffee. Out here, a bar of soap is as good as currency. The trouble, of course, is that it doesn't actually work very well.
Saltwater kills soap.
The manual never said that, but everyone finds out quickly. You rub and rub, waiting for foam that never comes, just a thin grey film that clings to your skin. You start thinking maybe the soap is offended by seawater, or maybe seawater just doesn't care. Eventually, someone figures out that if you add just a little fresh water, say, from your canteen, you can coax a few bubbles out of it. But that's a luxury, and canteen water is precious.
A few men keep a small helmet full aside just for that, shaving and a token rinse. It's not vanity.
It's discipline. Shaving daily in the tropics where the air feels like soup is a strange form of self-respect. Picture this. A line of Marines sitting on overturned ammo boxes at dawn, each with a mirror no bigger than a playing card, scraping away at stubble with safety razors. The water in their helmets looks more like broth than anything else. The blades go dull quickly, and there's no replacement, so they make do honing them on stones or just ignoring the tugging. It's part ritual, part reminder that they're still soldiers, not castaways. Every few days, a medical corpsman holds what they call GI hygiene lectures. No one volunteers for these. They're not inspiring pep talks. They're more like public shaming sessions with charts. The corpsman, armed with a pointer and infinite patience, explains once again that fungus spreads faster than gossip, that socks need to dry daily, and that foot powder is your best friend. Most Marines nod politely, then go back to doing exactly what they've always done: hang their socks on a stick and pray for wind. Still, the lectures serve a purpose. Disease is a bigger threat than bullets here. Malaria, dengue, dysentery, those are the real enemies. The hygiene talks, boring as they are, probably save lives. Even if everyone rolls their eyes, they still show up, if only because it's shaded and it counts as training time. Bathing near the reefs becomes a kind of social ritual. There's talking, joking, and quiet camaraderie. Someone hums a tune from home. Someone else splashes him. Someone yells that they're wasting water, as if there's any logic to that in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. For a few minutes each day, it feels normal, almost peaceful. A corporal named James Red Murphy writes in his diary that the sea is our bathroom, laundry, and psychiatrist all rolled into one. He's not wrong. Standing waist deep in the water, scrubbing salt out of his shirt, he notes that the ocean listens better than most lieutenants. That line ends up quoted years later in a unit newsletter, which tells you how much everyone related to it. Soap, though, remains the constant frustration. When supply ships finally manage to drop off a new shipment, the word spreads through camp like it's Christmas morning. Men line up for their bars, some sniffing them as if to confirm they're real. It's the small things that matter, the small, boring, precious things. There's also the smell. The combination of salt, sweat, gun oil, and tropical mildew becomes the unofficial scent of the Pacific campaign. You can wash, you can scrub, you can even douse yourself in aftershave if you somehow have any, but by midday, it's back. The smell of combat musk, as one Marine called it.
Oh, to New Georgia. You might think these conditions made everyone miserable, but that's not quite true. Misery gets dull after a while.
Routine replaces it. You adapt. The saltwater baths, the soap rationing, the helmet shaves, they become the rhythm of existence. The men stop complaining out loud, not because they're stoic heroes, but because it just takes too much energy to care. There's a certain calm acceptance to it all. Evenings are when the reef baths are best. The sun drops low, the air cools slightly, and the ocean glows gold and pink. The men wade out quietly, rifles stacked nearby in case of trouble. The coral scrapes underfoot, little fish dart around. And for a few moments, the war feels very far away. It's here, in these calm routines, that you glimpse something deeper, the quiet discipline of men who know they can't control much, but they can control this. Clean skin, a shaved face, socks hung neatly to dry. These small acts aren't about hygiene anymore. They're about identity. They remind them that underneath the grime and exhaustion, they're still themselves. There's one last piece to the daily ritual, the inspection. Every few days, the sergeants make the rounds, checking feet, hands, and armpits like overbearing parents. It's not glamorous, but it's effective.
Anyone showing signs of jungle rot gets sent to the medic.
It's embarrassing, but better than losing a toe. You learn quickly that clean enough isn't a joke. It's survival. Sometimes, during inspections, you hear laughter break out. A private caught with half a bar of soap melted into a single lump. A sergeant proudly showing off socks that have somehow turned orange from the clay soil. It's all absurd, but the absurdity keeps everyone sane. As the days roll by, the saltwater becomes almost a comfort. It's predictable, unchanging, dependable in a place where nothing else is. The Marines even start to assign nicknames to their bathing spots. Reef 1, the Spa, Shark Bay. There's a strange satisfaction in routine, in knowing that no matter what the war throws at them, they'll always have this, a patch of ocean, a bar of stubborn soap, and the unspoken understanding that it's enough. At night, the sound of waves carries into camp. You can almost hear it breathing slow, rhythmic, eternal. For some, it's the only lullaby they get. The ocean has become both their enemy and their sanctuary. It erodes everything: boots, uniforms, patience, but it also washes away the day, the dirt, and the weight of being human in an inhuman place. And now, as the weeks turn into months, something starts to shift. The sky changes color more often. Clouds linger longer. The breeze feels different, thicker, heavier. It's the subtle warning of what's coming next, because soon the rain won't be a rare relief.
It'll be constant.
The monsoon season is approaching, and with it, a whole new kind of misery. The ocean baths will turn into mud baths, the air will grow even heavier, and keeping clean won't just mean fighting salt, it'll mean fighting the island itself. But that's a story for the next night. When the first drops begin to fall, no one thinks much of it. After all, rain on a Pacific island isn't news, it's background noise. But by the third straight day, it stops being a novelty and starts feeling like a punishment handed down personally by the weather gods. The monsoon season doesn't arrive politely. It just sits down and refuses to leave. The same ocean that once gave you a bath now tries to drown your tent. The ground, once dry and dusty, turns into a living thing: mud that grabs your boots, swallows tent pegs, and seeps into everything you own. Every path becomes a trench.
Every tent smells like wet canvas, mildew, and faint despair.
You wake up damp, you fall asleep damp, and you stop pretending there's a difference between wet and dry. The sound of rain on canvas becomes constant, steady, almost hypnotic, a rhythm that never changes. The men joke that they're growing gills. Someone even sketches a cartoon for the bulletin board, a Marine with webbed feet and a bar of soap, captioned, "Adapt and survive." The laughter helps, but only barely, because the truth is, the island is winning. It's mid-September 1943, and the 1st Marine Division is sharing the island now with elements of the U.S. Army's 43rd Infantry Division. The units rotate patrols, share rations, and collectively curse the mud. Both have learned the same lesson: cleanliness isn't about comfort anymore. It's about morale, and morale is about survival. By now, the saltwater baths have stopped. The ocean is too rough, the paths too flooded. So, the new bath is rainwater if you can catch it. Helmets line up outside tents like metallic flowers. Barrels overflow. Some men even stand naked in the downpour, eyes closed, letting the cold water hammer the heat and grime out of them.
It's not glamorous, but it's something. The officers try to keep a sense of order.
Maintain hygiene, they say, as if anyone still has the energy to care. But they're not wrong. Disease spreads faster than rumor out here. The medics start issuing DDT powder white dust that smells faintly chemical, meant to keep mosquitoes and lice at bay. The men sprinkle it into their socks, onto their beds, even directly on their skin.
It works, kind of.
Mostly, it just adds another smell to the already impressive collection of odors everyone carries around. Inspections become stricter, foot checks twice daily. The sergeants line the men up, making sure no one's feet have turned into science experiments. A soldier with trench foot can't march, can't patrol, and can't fight, and no one can afford that. The process is as dull as it sounds. Remove socks, wiggle toes, get a nod, move on. But in its own strange way, it gives the men something solid to hold on to routine. The diaries from that time are full of small, weary observations. One corporal from the 43rd Infantry wrote, "Everything smells like a wet dog and looks like coffee grounds." Another noted, "We bathe in mud and dry in steam." That one sentence says it all. Hygiene at this point becomes almost symbolic. You can't control the rain, or the mud, or the fact that everything you own weighs twice as much as it used to. But you can control this one thing. You can wash your face, change your socks, and keep your rifle dry. It's a tiny act of rebellion against the chaos. Imagine spending your days knee-deep in brown water, your tent floor turning into a shallow pond. At night, you sleep on your cot with your gear hung from the tent poles to keep it out of the flood. You wake to find frogs hopping through camp, boots floating, and a few men using shovels to redirect the streams now running between the tents. It's absurd, but no one's laughing much anymore. There's a strange camaraderie that comes with shared misery, though.
Men start helping each other more.
You'll see a private cleaning his buddy's rifle, while the other wrings out his socks. You'll see someone offering the last of his dry towel to wipe off a friend's face. In a place where the jungle is trying to dissolve you, kindness becomes a survival skill too. The supply officers eventually issue extra foot powder and disinfectant wipes. They're treasured like gold. A clean pair of socks is better than mail from home. A dry towel is practically luxury goods. When someone gets a package from the States with soap or a handkerchief, the whole tent gathers to admire it like it's fine art. Command keeps hammering the same message. Clean troops are effective troops. It sounds bureaucratic, but they mean it. The Japanese aren't the main threat here, dysentery is. By the end of 1943, nearly half of all medical evacuations from the Solomon Islands are due to illness, not injuries. So yes, keeping your feet clean matters. It might be the thing that saves you. A sergeant from the 1st Marines later recalled that during those weeks, the only thing drier than the humour was the biscuits. Every joke is laced with exhaustion, but it's still humour, and that counts for something. They invent sayings like, if it's not raining, you're not in the Pacific. If it's not muddy, you're dreaming. It's gallows humour, but it's also resilience, the kind that doesn't make headlines, but wins wars quietly. One evening, as another storm rolls in, the camp lights flicker and go out. The men sit in silence, listening to the sound of water on canvas. Some smoke, some just stare into the dark. The rain has its own tempo, steady, soothing, relentless. A few of the men drift off to sleep to that sound, the same way city folks might drift off to traffic noise. For them, this is home now. Even decades later, the veterans remembered those rain-soaked nights. They remembered the way the mud sucked at their boots and how their socks never really dried. But they also remembered the strange calm that came with it, the steady heartbeat of rain, the shared misery that somehow felt peaceful. One Marine described it best in an interview years later. It was miserable, sure, but the sound of that rain, you'd lie there and listen, and for a few minutes, it was like the whole world was quiet. Just you and the rain, and the thought that someday it might stop. And maybe that's the secret of endurance, finding calm in the constant discomfort. The men of New Georgia didn't win medals for bathing or foot inspections or surviving moldy tents. But they did something harder. They adapted. They endured. They stayed human. And when the monsoon finally passed, leaving behind a world of green, clean air and sunlight, they found themselves strangely nostalgic for it. The rhythm, the routine, the weird sense of order the rain had forced upon them. They'd never admit it out loud, but part of them missed it. Not the mud, not the smell, but the quiet, the feeling that no matter how miserable the world got, they still had control over one thing themselves, even decades later. When they spoke about the Pacific, it wasn't the battles or the victories they remembered first. It was the rain. That endless, drumming, hypnotic rain, miserable, yes, but in its own strange way, the only luxury they ever had. If the war in the Pacific could be summed up in one color, it wouldn't be the blue of the ocean or the green of the jungle. It would be the brownish red of mud, the kind that stains everything it touches and never lets go. It's late 1943 on Bougainville Island. The 37th Infantry Division has just established its positions inland, carving camps into the edge of the jungle. The men have been there for weeks, maybe months, and every single one of them looks like they've been through a clay bath that never ended. You can't escape the dirt. It's in the air, in the tents, in the food. It mixes with sweat until your collar turns into sandpaper. Even the act of sitting leaves a mark. By mid-morning, the back of every neck is streaked red. The uniforms don't help. The US Army's standard herringbone, twill tough, olive drab, and meant for durability, turns out to be an excellent sponge. Once wet, it stays wet.
Once dirty, it stays dirty.
The fibers trap every grain of dust and hold it hostage forever. You can scrub until your arms ache.
It won't make a difference.
The fabric always looks like it just lost a fight with the planet. The Marines, for their part, wear lighter khakis in the early months, but those don't fare any better. They stain faster, rip easier, and take on a permanent reddish tint. Soon enough, every unit looks like a lineup of rust-colored ghosts. The soldiers joke about it because what else can they do? One to wear, one to wash, one to rot, they say.
It's not just a joke, it's a rule.
You get 3 sets of fatigues, and by month 2, none of them are fit for inspection. The one to rot part happens faster than anyone expects. Laundry becomes an obsession, or maybe a ritual. After patrol, when the sun is low and the heat finally tolerable, men gather near streams or shallow puddles, each clutching a bucket, a bar of soap, and a faint hope that this time the stains might come out. They never do, of course. The red clay of Bougainville is legendary fine-grained, oily, and relentless. It dyes fabric as if it were designed for it. Still, the men scrub anyway. Elbows deep in muddy water, they twist, slap, and rinse their uniforms until their knuckles ache. The soap army issue grey and vaguely chemical foams weekly in fresh water, but against the clay it's useless. The result is cleaner dirt, but dirt all the same. The smell is something else entirely, a mix of damp fabric, soap residue, sweat, and jungle rot. It hangs in the air like a fog. When you walk through the camp, you can tell who's been doing laundry and who's given up. The ones still trying have clothes pinned between bamboo poles, hanging limp in the heavy air. The ones who've surrendered wear stains like medals. The humidity doesn't help.
Nothing ever dries completely.
Shirts hung in the sun grow stiff, then soft again, then start smelling faintly of mildew. The locals, those few who remain near the coast, seem to understand. They tell the soldiers that the island likes to keep things, and after a while, the soldiers start believing it. Each man develops his own system. Some rotate uniforms daily, one drying, one on their back, one rolled up as backup. Others wash everything at once, gambling that it'll all dry before the next rain. It rarely does. You can wake up to clear skies, wash your clothes in perfect sunlight, and 5 minutes later, watch a wall of rain move in like it has a personal grudge against you. Laundry duty also becomes a kind of social hour. You see men lined up along creeks knee-deep in water, slapping shirts against rocks, telling jokes about home.
I used to complain when the washer ate a sock, one guy mutters.
Now I'd trade my rifle for a spin cycle. Another adds, don't need starch, the mud handles that. The laughter is quiet, tired, but real. The officers occasionally show up to remind everyone that cleanliness is a matter of discipline. It's a nice thought, but discipline is hard to maintain when your clothes start sprouting mushrooms. The official army manual never covered how to do laundry when the air itself is wet. Veterans later wrote that the smell of mildew became the signature scent of Bougainville, stronger than the gunpowder, more constant than the ocean. You could follow your nose from one unit to another and never lose your bearings. Sometimes, just to keep things interesting, the men experiment. A few try using gasoline to clean grease stains, which works briefly before it ruins the fabric entirely. Others mix sand with soap to make a kind of abrasive cleaner. It's creative and it almost helps, but the red clay still wins in the end. When a supply ship finally delivers new uniforms, the excitement is genuine. Fresh khakis, neatly folded, untouched by mud, it feels like Christmas. Within a day, though, they're ruined again. The island doesn't care how new the fabric is. It has its own rules. There's a quiet understanding among the men that perfection is impossible here. You can't stay clean. You can only stay less dirty than yesterday. That becomes the goal. Small victories. A shirt that smells mostly like soap. A pair of socks that are only half damp. Boots that still resemble their original color. Some soldiers take pride in keeping up appearances. They scrub until the seams fray, polish their brass, and fold their laundry with care. Others give up entirely, cutting off sleeves, rolling up cuffs, living in a kind of muddy resignation. Both approaches are respected. In war, personal standards are as flexible as the weather. Evenings are the best time for drying clothes, the sun dropping low, the air heavy with smoke from cooking fires, bamboo racks lined with shirts and trousers swaying gently. There's something oddly peaceful about it. The camp looks almost domestic, like a row of strange tropical backyards. For a brief moment it feels normal, but the island never lets you get too comfortable. The peace rarely lasts long. The first rumble of thunder is always somewhere nearby, and when it comes fast. The sky darkens without warning, the wind shifts, and within minutes the racks are soaked. You run out to grab what you can, half-dried uniforms, half-washed socks, but it's pointless. The rain wins every time. You stand there in the downpour, watching the dirt you just washed out slide right back in. That's the rhythm of Bougainville. Scrub, rinse, hang, repeat, and surrender. The island doesn't care how disciplined you are, how neatly you fold your sleeves, or how many bars of soap you go through. It only cares about reminding you who's in charge. And as the storm clouds settle again, soaking the camp in another curtain of rain, you realize something simple. This isn't about laundry anymore. It's about persistence, the quiet, stubborn belief that doing the small things right still matters, even when the world around you refuses to cooperate. After all, clean clothes are temporary. The dirt is forever. And as the last light fades and the first drops fall again, you look up at the sky and sigh. The bamboo racks are still full of shirts that will never dry, swaying gently in the wind. The island doesn't care about clean laundry. It never did. By early 1944, the men on Bougainville have settled into a rhythm, a slow, sweaty, unending cycle of washing what can't really be cleaned. They've learned to work with what the island gives them: salt water, sunlight, and stubbornness. The army calls it field laundry procedure. The soldiers call it wishful thinking. It starts with soap, or the idea of soap. Supply ships bring it in when they can. Small, dull grey bars packed in wax paper, stamped US Army for laundry. Each bar is roughly the size and consistency of a brick and smells faintly industrial. If you dropped one, it could probably break a toe. The men hoard them like gold, trading a half bar for cigarettes or a full one for a favor. On paper, the process is simple: scrub, rinse, wring, dry. But nothing on a Pacific island is ever simple. The nearest thing to a washing machine is a steel helmet or a 5-gallon fuel can with the top cut off. Salt water does most of the work, and not very well. You fill the can, stir in a few shavings of soap, and start scrubbing your uniform until your hands wrinkle like old paper. The salt eats the fabric slowly, but the mud doesn't care. You scrub until your arms ache and the water turns the color of rust. Then you wring the shirt out, twisting until it drips in steady lines down your arms. By now, the sun is high enough to make you dizzy, and the smell of soap, sweat, and ocean hangs heavy in the air. The next step is drying, which sounds easy, until you remember that dry is more of a theoretical state in the tropics. So you string laundry lines between coconut palms using parachute cord or field wire, hang your clothes, and wait for the miracle of evaporation. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. The sight of those laundry lines, hundreds of shirts and trousers swaying lazily between palm trees, becomes strangely iconic. It's like a strange army garden, uniforms fluttering like green flags under a blazing sun. For a few hours, the camp almost looks peaceful, but the peace doesn't last long. The air grows heavy by afternoon, the clouds build, and a curtain of rain sweeps across the island again. The laundry that was almost dry is soaked all over, starting the cycle anew. Mildew becomes the enemy. It grows on everything: uniforms, boots, canvas, even the straps of your pack. You can smell it before you see it. A sour, sweet rot that no amount of scrubbing removes. The medics warn that mildew spores can cause infections, but there's no cure except vigilance and sunlight, both in short supply. Still, the men keep washing. Because not washing feels worse. There's something about going through the motions, about trying to keep the dirt at bay, even when the dirt always wins. It gives a sense of order in a place where everything else feels chaotic. Now and then, when the supplies run low, the soldiers borrow methods from the local islanders' women who've been washing clothes in rivers and lagoons long before the war ever came. They use crushed roots from the soapberry tree, beating them into a foam that actually lathers in salt water. The men are amazed. One native woman demonstrates, dunking a shirt into the lagoon, rubbing it with the foamy mixture and lifting it out spotless. The Marines try to imitate her, but end up just making a mess. She laughs, shakes her head, and takes the shirt back. It's humbling. The army might have manuals and logistics, but the locals have experienced centuries of it. They understand the rhythm of the island in a way the newcomers never will. Every now and then, someone gets creative. Gasoline, for instance, becomes the all-purpose cleaner of choice. Grease on your weapon? Gasoline. Oil stain on your pants? Gasoline. Need to start a fire, disinfect a wound, or kill a spider? Gasoline. It's the duct tape of the Pacific. It's also dangerous. One soldier, Private Mills from the 129th Infantry, notes in his diary that he managed to clean his uniform and remove his eyebrows in the same afternoon. The men start calling gasoline cleaning the quick-dry method. The officers eventually forbid it, but the habit sticks. When your only other option is wearing a shirt that smells like old soup, you take risks. By now, everyone's uniforms have lost their original color. The greens have faded into yellows, the khakis into beige, and every piece of cloth is tinged with that persistent red clay. Buttons are missing. Patches are worn down to threads. You can tell a veteran of Bougainville by the way his clothes hang limp, stiff, and permanently crinkled from 100 washings. There's a strange poetry to it, though. The lines of clothing between the trees, the rhythmic sound of fabric being slapped against rocks, the occasional hiss of steam as someone irons out wrinkles using a canteen of boiling water and a mess tin lid. It's all part of the daily soundtrack of life here. The sun, when it does shine, becomes both enemy and savior. It dries clothes fast, but it also bleaches them until they look ghostly pale. A few soldiers joke that they're slowly disappearing, turning the color of the sand. When the light hits the camp just right, the hanging shirts seem to glow a strange mix of domestic normalcy and military grit. The drying process is a gamble. Too little sun and mildew wins. Too much and the fabric weakens. You learn to judge the air by feel the weight of it, the scent of the coming rain. You hang your clothes early, check them often, and hope for mercy from the clouds. Sometimes luck cooperates. The breeze picks up, the humidity drops just enough, and for a few glorious hours the uniforms actually dry. The men slip into shirts that feel crisp instead of clammy. It's a small miracle and everyone notices. The camp smells faintly of soap and sunshine, and for a while you can almost forget you're living in a swamp. Laundry days are never officially scheduled, but everyone knows when it's time. You can see it in the way sleeves start to stiffen and collars darken. It becomes an unspoken rhythm. 3 days in the same uniform, then a desperate attempt to make it smell less like despair. There's no judgment, though. Everyone's in the same boat, or in this case, the same mud. Officers and privates alike hang their shirts side by side, hoping the sun doesn't change its mind. Hierarchy doesn't mean much when everyone smells like mildew. Weeks pass like this: wash, hang, hope, repeat. The soap dwindles. Bars are shaved down to slivers, then crumbs. Some men carve them into small pellets and store them in matchboxes. When word comes that the next supply ship might bring more, it's the most exciting news anyone's heard in days. And then, one afternoon, it happens. A cargo barge arrives at the small beachhead, unloading crates of supplies, tinned food, ammunition, mail, and, yes, soap. A sergeant pries open the crate and holds up a bar like it's a relic. Everyone cheers, half joking, half sincere. The new soap smells faintly of pine, a small miracle in a world that usually smells like mud and smoke. It won't change much, the stains will stay, the humidity will win, but it feels like a victory anyway. In war, you take your wins where you can, and on Bougainville, a crate of laundry soap might as well be gold. You can tell a memory by its smell. Even decades later, the veterans of Bougainville didn't talk about the battles first. They talked about the way everything smelled a heavy, complicated mix of life, decay, and endurance. The Pacific had its own perfume, salt air, diesel fumes, wet jungle, and something else beneath it all, mildew. It clung to canvas tents, to socks, to the very air itself. Every breath carried the dampness of a place that never truly dried. If you'd spent even a week there, you could recognize that scent anywhere. Private Edward Beck of the 145th Infantry wrote in his 1944 journal, "The island has a smell that never leaves you. You carry it home in your clothes, and when you unpack, it's still there like the war doesn't want to let go." He wasn't exaggerating. Everything the soldiers owned, their uniforms, their boots, their gear, absorbed that scent and gave it back in waves. Laundry wasn't just about cleaning. It was about fighting that invisible reminder that the island was slowly claiming you. The daily washing ritual had long since become second nature. Not everyone participated with enthusiasm, but everyone participated. Laundry wasn't assigned, it was rotated quietly, like guard duty. Each squad had its own rhythm. One day, Alpha Company would take over the shallow creek behind the camp. The next Charlie Company, you'd see them in the distance, shirts tied around their waists, stamping clothes against rocks while talking about baseball, home, or nothing at all. Routine chores like that had a strange effect on morale. They didn't feel heroic, but they kept people grounded. Scrubbing a shirt until your hands went numb wasn't glamorous, but it gave you something tangible to control. When every day was humid chaos, control even over something as small as a clean sleeve mattered more than anyone admitted. Some soldiers started making competitions out of it. Who could get their shirts the cleanest, meaning the least muddy, or whose laundry line would stay upright through the next rainstorm. Others treated the ritual as meditation, the steady rhythm of scrubbing, rinsing, wringing, the glint of sunlight on water, the quiet sound of soap rubbing fabric. It was repetitive, yes, but repetition can be comforting when everything else feels unpredictable. There were always a few jokers in the group, of course. One Marine painted US Pacific Laundry committees on an old ammunition crate and started charging clients a coconut per wash. Someone else added a sign, guaranteed cleaner than the Navy. The humor wasn't about the jokes themselves, it was about the reminder that they could still laugh. And then there were the smells. Oh, the smells. The camp carried them like a symphony. Sweat, fuel, wet boots, cigarette smoke, insect repellent, and that stubborn hint of soap. The soap never completely masked the rest. It just floated on top of it like a thin film of civility. Letters home sometimes mentioned it. "Everything smells like mildew and oil," wrote one corporal. "But sometimes, when I'm shaving, I catch a whiff of soap and it feels like Sunday morning back home." It was those small moments, a scent, a sound, a familiar gesture that connected them to the world beyond the jungle. The supply chain wasn't always reliable, so when soap ran out, they found substitutes. Crushed soapberries, wood ash mixed with sand, even powdered disinfectant from medical kits. Anything that foamed even a little became a treasure. One sergeant wrote, "We used enough disinfectant to sterilize a hospital just to get the smell of the island off our shirts. And yet, even with all the effort, the clean smell never lasted. Within hours of putting on freshly washed clothes, you'd be sweating again. The fabric darkened with moisture, and the scent of the jungle crept back in. It was a losing battle, but it was still worth fighting. Laundry time also brought people together. You learned things about the men next to you that you'd never hear anywhere else. Conversations flowed easier when your hands were busy. Stories got told, songs hummed, superstitions shared. One veteran said later, "We cleaned our clothes and our heads at the same time." The rhythm of camp life depended on it. Days divided themselves around the chores: wash in the morning, dry at midday, fold before nightfall. The order of it all was comforting a way to measure time in a place where seasons didn't change and the calendar lost meaning. The officers noticed too. They stopped treating laundry as trivial and started recognizing it as morale work. Units that kept their clothes cleaner tended to have fewer medical cases, fewer fights, and slightly higher spirits. It wasn't science, but it worked. Sometimes a faint breeze would drift through the camp and carry a hint of clean fabric, faint, fleeting, but real. For those few minutes, it was easy to forget the mud and the insects and the endless rain. The smell of soap meant civilization. It meant home. At night, the jungle quieted just enough for the men to notice their surroundings again. The laundry line swayed gently in the darkness, shirts whispering against one another in the breeze. The scent of damp fabric, smoke and salt hung thick in the air. Somewhere, a radio played a scratchy song from back home, blending with the rhythmic chorus of frogs and crickets. Private Beck wrote again in his journal that month, "I think I'll remember this smell forever. The mud, the soap, the smoke. It's awful, but it's ours." That line sums up the strange intimacy of it all, the ownership of discomfort, the way even foul smells became familiar, almost comforting. It was a reminder that they were alive, that they were still human, still capable of noticing small things in a vast and uncaring war. When a new shipment of soap finally arrived, fresh bars smelling faintly of pine and chemicals, the whole camp celebrated. It wasn't just about hygiene. It was about the illusion of normalcy, the simple, satisfying act of unwrapping something clean, solid, dependable. The men joked that they should start wearing the bars as cologne. Someone carved one into the shape of a heart and hung it on a string. Another Marine hid a bar in his footlocker for peacetime, as if soap could outlast the war. The smells of the Pacific never truly left them. Even after the uniforms were burned, even after the mud had long dried, veterans said they could still catch it. Sometimes the faint tang of salt and oil, and something indefinably tropical. It came back to them in basements, in summer storms, in old army trunks opened after decades, and they'd smile, remembering that life in the jungle wasn't all fear and misery. It was also the sound of laundry slapping against rock, the smell of soap on a humid morning, the sight of shirts fluttering between palm trees like quiet flags of persistence. They used to say that if they ever smelled like real soap again, it meant the war was truly over, and for most of them, that was all the closure they ever needed. The sun doesn't really set on Guadalcanal so much as it surrenders. One moment, the jungle is glowing golden green. The next, it's pitch black, as if someone flipped a cosmic switch. The airfield goes quiet, the last trucks sputter to a stop, and for a brief moment there's a strange, uneasy peace, the kind that feels borrowed. It's late 1942, and you're stationed at Henderson Field, a name that sounds civilized enough to belong to a small-town airport, but is, in reality, a patch of mud, crushed coral, and exhausted men. The air smells of fuel and sweat, and the faint sweetness of decaying vegetation. The day's heat lingers long after sunset, trapped under the heavy canvas tents that line the camp. You'd think darkness might bring relief, but it doesn't. The nights here are as alive as the days, louder even. The insects start their chorus the moment the sun dips below the palms, a constant buzzing hum that fills every pause in conversation. Mosquitoes emerge in clouds so thick they seem to move like smoke. The men call them the Guadalcanal Air Force. Inside the tents, the air hangs still and wet. Canvas doesn't breathe much, and there's no such thing as airflow when the jungle's pressing in from all sides. Each tent houses 4 to 6 men, their cots arranged in neat rows, mosquito bars hanging down like ghostly veils. By now, everyone's learned the hard way that skipping the net means an itch that lasts for weeks or worse. Malaria. The cots are simple things: aluminum frames, stretched canvas, and whatever passes for a mattress. Some men line them with ponchos to keep out the damp. Others scavenge bits of cardboard or packing paper to create a thin barrier between their backs and the chill of the ground. It doesn't help much, but it feels like trying, and trying counts. Every evening, there's a quiet routine that unfolds like clockwork. Helmets are stacked, boots unlaced, shirts peeled off and hung on ropes to air out. Cigarettes flare in the dim light, the glow reflected in tired eyes. A few men read letters under flashlights, the paper already soft from being handled too many times. Others just sit and stare, lost in thought or listening to the far-off rumble of engines from the coast. The sound of the generators is constant, a low mechanical heartbeat, keeping the camp alive. They power the radio shack, the mess lights, the tiny medical tent. When they shut down for the night, it feels like the world exhales. But before that happens, there's always one more round of routine: the nightly inspection. Each squad has its duties. Some check perimeter lines. Others clean rifles, refill water cans, or double-check foxholes. A few unlucky souls pull night watch, posted at the airstrip to guard against possible raids. It's a lonely job, standing out there under a moonless sky, the horizon an endless silhouette of palm fronds. You listen for the hum of enemy planes and tell yourself you'll hear them in time. You never really do. The air raid alarms come without warning. A single wailing note cuts through the night, followed by shouting, the slap of boots, and the frantic dash for cover. Every man dives for his trench, the ground still warm from the day's sun. Sometimes it's a false alarm, sometimes it's not. You lie there, face down, counting the seconds, waiting for the thump of bombs or the roar of engines that may or may not come, and then silence again. The insects start back up as if nothing happened. Someone mutters something under his breath. Someone else lights a cigarette with shaking hands. Slowly, everyone climbs out of the trenches, brushes off the dirt, and pretends it never happened. Sleep resumes, though no one really calls it that. It's more like drifting in and out of awareness, always one sound away from being awake again. For many of the men, sleep becomes an art form, something to be managed strategically. You learn to rest when you can, in short bursts, even sitting up if necessary. You tune out the noise, the buzzing, the coughing, the distant shouting, and let your body do what it can. The camp at night has its own rhythm. Somewhere in the distance a sentry coughs. Someone shifts on his cot. A tin cup rattles. The ocean, a mile away, whispers faintly through the trees. It's not peaceful exactly, but it's steady, predictable, and that in wartime is a kind of peace. Occasionally, the night sky lights up, not from bombs this time, but from flares or tracer rounds arcing lazily across the horizon. They look strangely beautiful streaks of red and white against the blackness, like fireworks on the 4th of July. For a moment, you can almost pretend you're home. Then the light fades, and the illusion goes with it. The Marines have a term for this twilight hour before real sleep, the in-between. It's when the body's too tired to move, but the mind's too restless to stop. You lie on your cot, listening to the drip of condensation from the tent poles, the faint buzz of mosquitoes against the netting, and the murmur of voices outside. Someone always tells a story, usually funny, often familiar, and the others listen, not because they haven't heard it before, but because it's comforting to hear it again. Out near the edge of the camp, close to the runway, a few men have strung their hammocks between palm trees instead of using tents. They swear it's cooler that way, though it also means being more exposed. When the planes take off early in the morning, the roar of engines jolts them awake before dawn. But for now they sway gently in the dark, half hidden, half dreaming. The smell of the camp changes as the night deepens. The sharp tang of fuel fades, replaced by the earthy scent of damp soil and the faint sweetness of coconut smoke from dying cook fires. Somewhere, a gramophone plays a scratchy record, Glenn Miller, maybe, or Bing Crosby, the notes warped by humidity, but still recognizable. The sound drifts through the tents, blending with the steady drone of insects until it becomes part of the night itself. And then, gradually, everything starts to settle. The last cigarettes burn out. The low conversations fade. The generator stutters, coughs, and finally dies. The camp plunges into full darkness, lit only by the pale light of the moon and the dim glow of fireflies hovering over puddles. It's never truly quiet here, not with the jungle alive all around you, but it's as close as it gets. The air feels heavy but calm. You lie there, one hand resting on your rifle, listening to the waves somewhere out beyond the palms, blending with the faint echo of distant gunfire. The war is still out there, but for a few hours it feels suspended, like the island itself is holding its breath. And in that stillness, at last, sleep comes. Not deep, not restful, but real enough to matter. And for tonight, that's enough. Sleep on Guadalcanal isn't something you do. It's something you negotiate. You bargain with it, steal moments from it, chase it like a mirage, and even when you catch it, it never stays long. The nights are thick with heat. Canvas tents trap the day's sun like ovens, and the air inside feels heavy enough to chew. The humidity seeps into everything: your pillow, your blanket, even the pages of your letters from home. They curl at the edges, stained with fingerprints and sweat. The ink runs if you're not careful, and sometimes it runs even when you are. You try to sleep anyway. You lie on your cot, shirtless, boots off, but it doesn't help. The air doesn't move. You can hear the mosquitoes outside the netting, thousands of them humming in unison. The men call it the mosquito serenade. It's a sound that never stops. Some find it maddening. Others say it's almost comforting, like static from a faraway radio station that never quite tunes in. There's no silence here, not ever. The jungle hums, the ocean sighs, the night watch murmurs quietly near the perimeter. Somewhere, a generator sputters back to life.
A truck backfires. A rifle bolt clicks.
Even in stillness, Guadalcanal buzzes. You get used to it, or you pretend to. The human brain adapts faster than you'd think. After a few weeks, the body starts taking sleep in installments, 20 minutes here, an hour there, like a bank loan it never quite repays. You learn to sleep through anything except the things that matter. Footsteps too close, engines too low, the sudden metallic cry of an air raid siren. When you do drift off, the dreams are strange. Some are about home normal things like breakfast tables, cold mornings, or the smell of coffee. Others are about nothing at all, just flashes of noise and color, fragments of a world that makes more sense asleep than awake. Between raids, the men develop small rituals to make rest possible. Some rig fans out of old aircraft propeller blades, attaching them to hand-cranked motors scavenged from wrecks. They call them tropical breezes, though most barely stir the air.
Still, it's something.
Others soak towels in rainwater and drape them over their faces, the evaporating moisture, a brief illusion of cool. Letters help too.
Writing them, reading them, rereading them until the paper goes soft.
The mail doesn't come often, but when it does, it changes the mood of the whole camp. You'll see men sitting under flashlights, propped up on elbows, smiling faintly as they read the same paragraph for the 10th time. They don't just read the words, they hold the paper close, as if it carries the scent of home. Some write back immediately, sweating over every sentence, trying to sound calm and normal. Everything's fine here. They begin the great lie of every soldier at war. They talk about weather, about friends, about the food, which is bad but edible. They never mention the nights like this, the ones that never end. As midnight stretches on, the camp takes on a kind of rhythm.
Someone coughs.
Someone shifts in his cot. The faint flick of a lighter flares and fades. Cigarettes before sleep become the closest thing to a bedtime ritual. You share one with the guy next to you, a quiet pact that says, "I'm still here, and so are you." The smoke curls lazily under the tent roof, catching the light from a single hanging bulb. It smells of tobacco, canvas, and sweat, oddly pleasant after a day of diesel and gunpowder. You lean back, close your eyes, and listen. The jungle hums, the waves whisper, the men breathe. For a brief moment you could almost believe it's peace, but it's not.
It never is. Around 2 in the morning, someone shouts.
It's not an alarm, not yet, just a false start.
Everyone tenses anyway.
Sleep leaves instantly like a frightened animal. You wait, nothing happens. The silence afterward feels heavier than the noise. Eventually, you lie back down, heart still racing, pretending you weren't scared.
Everyone does. Sleep returns cautiously.
Maybe half an hour passes. You dream of rain this time, clean, cool, endless rain, the kind that smells of earth instead of fear. Then from nowhere, the real alarm sounds. A wailing siren cuts through the night like a blade. Men roll out of cots in seconds, feet hitting the dirt, grabbing helmets and rifles by instinct. The first rule of survival is never to hesitate. The second is to breathe. Most forget both. Outside, the air feels electric. You can hear the distant drone of engines, low and steady Japanese bombers most likely. The searchlights flick on, slicing through clouds of mosquitoes like silver lances. Somewhere to the east, anti-aircraft guns start barking. You can see the flashes, bright and staccato against the dark sky. You hunker down in your foxhole, dirt pressing cold against your palms. The men don't talk.
They don't need to.
You just listen to the engines, the bursts of fire, the rising pitch of the alarm.
And then just as suddenly as it began, it's over.
The bombers have turned back, or maybe they missed entirely. No one's sure. The siren fades, and the night returns to its usual chorus. No one goes back to bed right away. You sit there, eyes adjusting to the dark, the adrenaline slowly draining away. Someone cracks a joke about frequent flyer miles, and it's not funny, but everyone laughs anyway. Humor is a kind of medicine here, cheap, immediate, and better than none. By the time things settle again, it's nearly dawn. The sky over the palm trees starts to pale, the faintest hint of grey creeping in. The air cools just a little. You can hear waves somewhere beyond the camp, their rhythm steady, indifferent. Some men try to catch a last hour of rest before reveille, curling up on their cots, rifles still beside them.
Others stay awake, watching the light grow.
The line between being asleep and being ready has blurred completely. Out here, they're the same thing. As the first trucks rumble to life and the generators cough awake again, the camp begins its slow return to motion. Another night survived, another morning waiting to begin, and in the soft half-light, as the mosquitoes finally retreat and the jungle starts to yawn itself awake, one thought drifts quietly through everyone's mind. Sleep isn't rest here, it's just a truce, and that truce never lasts long. Just before dawn, another alarm pierces the camp, and the cycle begins again. There comes a point on Guadalcanal when exhaustion stops feeling like tiredness and starts feeling like normal life. It's not that the men get used to it, they just learn to function through it. They find a rhythm inside the chaos, a kind of uneasy balance between alertness and surrender. By the early months of 1943, the men at Henderson Field have turned sleep into an operation of its own. There are schedules now, rotations, shifts, guard posts, all designed to give everyone a few hours of rest without leaving the camp unprotected.
It's a strange system, but it works.
Sleep when you can has become the unspoken law of survival. You might catch a nap in the midday heat, under the wing of an idle aircraft, or beside a stack of fuel drums. You might close your eyes in the mess tent, your head resting on a crate of tinned rations. Or maybe you'll find 10 quiet minutes leaning against a palm tree, boots still on, rifle across your lap. Every moment counts. The discipline of it all is what keeps them going. Routines that would have felt trivial back home, cleaning rifles, folding clothes, writing letters, become anchors in a drifting world. The sergeants enforce them gently but firmly, knowing that order, even artificial order, keeps the mind from fraying. A clean weapon, a clean conscience, one of them likes to say. The men roll their eyes, but they follow the rule. Even sleep itself has its own rules.
Never remove your boots completely. Never let your rifle out of reach.
Always know where the nearest trench is. And never, under any circumstances, let yourself believe you'll get a full night's rest. Hope like that is dangerous. The tents look almost peaceful from the outside lines of canvas domes half buried in the mud, glowing faintly from lantern light. But inside, the atmosphere is closer to a submarine, cramped, humid, and full of quiet breathing. Someone snores softly.
Someone talks in his sleep.
The air is thick with the smell of salt and oil and the faint sweetness of cigarette smoke. The men don't dream much anymore. Or maybe they do, but they forget as soon as they wake. The dreams that stay are short, vivid, and strange flashes of home, of faces that feel too far away to be real. One Marine later said, "I dreamed of breakfast more than I dreamed of women." It sounds like a joke, but it wasn't. In a world where hunger and fatigue blend together, the mind longs for the simplest comforts. There are moments, though, when sleep feels almost sacred. When the generators go quiet and the jungle hum fades to a whisper, a strange calm settles over the camp. The sound of the ocean drifts in from the distance, steady, rhythmic, unbothered by human affairs. The men lie there, listening, and for those few minutes, the war feels far away. Private Harold Lawson, 1st Marine Division, wrote in his field diary, "It's strange how the ocean helps you sleep.
Even when you know it hides enemy ships somewhere beyond the horizon.
You stop thinking about them. You just listen to the waves and let go." He wasn't alone in that feeling. Many veterans would later say that what kept them sane wasn't courage or strategy, it was rhythm. The rhythm of breathing, of the waves, of the monotonous routines that made one day blend into the next. Discipline, they found, wasn't just about following orders. It was about maintaining identity, the quiet defiance of staying human in a place that wanted to grind humanity out of you. You shaved because it mattered. You folded your blanket because it reminded you of home. You tried to sleep because sleep meant you were still alive. Over time, even the fear adapted. The sudden alarms, the raids, the endless tension, they became background noise, part of the strange music of the island. When the sirens wailed, the men reacted out of muscle memory, not panic. When they stopped, everyone went right back to what they were doing. The mind, like the body, learns to ration energy. It's easy to forget that these men were barely out of their teens. 1920-21. They carried rifles heavier than some of their childhood dreams. They fought by day and by night they fought for rest. One veteran described it best years later. "We didn't sleep to recover. We slept to forget time." The medical officers worried about it, the slow erosion of rest, the long-term toll of constant fatigue. Some men developed tremors, others hallucinations. A few simply shut down, falling asleep anywhere, anytime, even mid-conversation. But most endured not through willpower, but through ritual. Before lights out, there's always a ritual. A cigarette passed around. A story told for the 10th time. A quiet laugh over something trivial. These moments, small as they are, act like lullabies. Familiar, steady, human. They remind everyone that the day has an end, that even here, in this swamp of uncertainty, there's still a rhythm to things. The officers, too, cling to these routines. Colonel Twining, who commands part of the air operations, insists on nightly briefings even if there's nothing new to report. "Men sleep better after structure," he says. And he's right. The simple act of hearing someone speak with authority, even about weather reports, helps the mind settle. As the months drag on, Guadalcanal begins to change the men, but not in the ways you might expect. They don't become numb. They become quieter, more patient. They learn that endurance isn't loud. It's the soft persistence of getting up, doing the job, and lying down again night after night, until the calendar forgets to turn. Years later, when these men talk about the island, they don't describe it as heroic. They describe it as rhythmic. "We learned to live to the tempo of the waves," one Marine said. "You breathe in when the tide comes in. You breathe out when it goes out. And if you listen hard enough, you can sleep through anything." For them, sleep wasn't an escape from the war, it was part of surviving it, a quiet protest against chaos, a fragile piece of humanity reclaimed under canvas and moonlight. By the time new troops rotated in, the veterans of Guadalcanal had become experts in stillness. They could nap through artillery, wake instantly at the sound of danger, and find calm in the noise that once terrified them. They'd learned that rest wasn't about silence or comfort. It was about trust that for this one moment someone else was keeping watch. The war would move on eventually, new islands, new airfields, new nights. But for those who lived through Guadalcanal, the sound of sleep would never again mean safety. It would mean defiance, and as the years passed, when they closed their eyes back home and heard rain on the roof or waves on a shore. It all came back: the canvas, the heat, the hum of insects, the soft breathing of men too tired to dream. Many said the steady rhythm of the ocean became the lullaby that kept them sane, and maybe, in its own quiet way, it still does. There are few sounds in war more exciting than the words mail call. Not gunfire, not aircraft engines, not even the promise of dinner. Just those two simple words. You could be ankle deep in mud halfway through a bad meal, or dead asleep after a night on watch, and you'd still find the energy to run. It's early 1944 on Bougainville. The war in the Pacific has stretched into its third, exhausting year, and the soldiers have learned that patience is not a virtue, it's a survival skill. The days pass slowly, one blending into another, and the distance between the front lines and home feels impossibly vast.
Mail is the only thing that bridges it. When it arrives, it's never on schedule.
The Navy's mail ships run through unpredictable waters, dodging enemy submarines and navigating routes that stretch thousands of miles across the Pacific. Letters can take weeks, sometimes months, to arrive if they arrive at all. There's no tracking, no delivery updates, no guarantees. Just hope wrapped in an envelope. Each unit has its own Army post office number. For the men of Bougainville, it's APU 929, a number that becomes as familiar as their own address back home. Friends and family memorize it, writing it carefully on envelopes already yellowed by the time they reach the island. The address looks simple enough: be James McAllister, Code C, 37th Infantry Division, APO 929, CO Postmaster, San Francisco. Calif, San Francisco, that's where every Pacific letter begins. From there, it joins an endless stream of mailbags loaded onto ships that move from island to island like slow, stubborn messengers of love and routine. It's the most complicated postal system ever built, and it runs on patience. When the word spreads that a mail plane is coming, the entire camp changes. Men who've been half asleep for days suddenly sit up straighter. Even the weather seems to pause. The cargo planes, often C-47s, bring supplies, ammunition, and food, but no one really cares about those. What matters are the burlap sacks stuffed with envelopes, each one a tiny piece of the world left behind. Mail call doesn't happen every day. Sometimes it doesn't happen for weeks, and when it does, it becomes a ritual. The men gather around as the mail clerk, usually a corporal who has achieved near mythical status, begins calling out names. He stands on a crate, voice steady, a list in his hand. Every name is a heartbeat. Bennett.
Here, Stevens. Here, Carter.
Nothing for you today. That last one hits hard.
A small pause, a flicker of disappointment, then the face rests.
Maybe next time. Everyone says it, and everyone knows it's a lie they need to believe. For those lucky enough to hear their names, the moment is sacred. They turn the envelope over in their hands, tracing the handwriting, staring at the postmark. They can tell by the paper and ink whether it came from a wife, a mother, or a friend. The letters smell faintly of home, sometimes perfume, sometimes cigarettes, sometimes just paper that's touched a different kind of air. One private in the 145th Infantry wrote that he used to hold his mother's letters to his nose before reading them.
They smell like laundry soap, he said.
I don't know how, but they do. Even a single envelope can lift morale across an entire company. Men pass letters around, sharing lines, reading aloud small bits of normal life baseball scores, a new baby, a broken washing machine. It doesn't matter what the letters say. What matters is that they exist. The Army's postal system is a miracle of organization and chaos. From stateside post offices to field mail depots, every letter changes hands dozens of times. It's sorted, censored, repackaged, and sometimes photographed, especially when sent as V-mail, or Victory Mail, is one of those wartime innovations that sounds futuristic but feels strangely personal. Instead of shipping physical letters, the Army photographs them onto microfilm, reducing thousands of pages into a single roll that can fit in a soldier's pocket. Once the film reaches its destination, the letters are printed back onto paper, small but legible, and handed out. The process saves space, money, and time, but it can't replicate the feel of real handwriting. Still, it's better than nothing. Some soldiers joke that the miniature letters make their family's words feel more important. You gotta squint to read it, one Marine says, so you pay extra attention. Mail doesn't just connect, it transforms the entire mood of a camp. A good mail day feels like a holiday. The conversations grow louder, the laughter easier. For a while, everyone forgets the heat, the bugs, the endless mud. For a few hours, war pauses. Of course, the opposite is also true. When the mail doesn't come, the silence grows heavier. Men become short-tempered, withdrawn. They count the days since the last delivery, like prisoners marking walls. The absence of mail is worse than bad news, because at least bad news is something. No news is emptiness. The mail clerks understand this better than anyone. Their job is part logistical, part psychological. They carry the power to lift spirits or crush them, one envelope at a time. They also bear the burden of delivering the other kind of letter, the ones marked War Department. Those are read privately, sometimes not at all. Everyone knows what the thin, official envelopes mean. No one talks about them. The waiting becomes its own kind of endurance. Every sound of an approaching aircraft, every radio update, every rumor of a supply ship sparks a flutter of hope. Men who haven't believed in luck in months find themselves silently bargaining with fate. Just one letter, just one line from home, and then one afternoon it happens. The familiar drone of engines echoes across the jungle. The men look up, squinting against the sun, spotting the slow grey silhouette of a C-47 circling the island. It's coming in low, landing gear down, tires kissing the coral runway in a puff of dust. No one cheers. Not yet. It's too sacred for noise. The plane taxis to a stop near the supply depot. The engines cough, then go silent. The rear hatch opens, and the crew begins unloading cargo crates, oil drums, sacks of supplies. And then they see it, the burlap mailbags marked with faded black lettering. For a moment, no one moves. Then, as if pulled by the same invisible string, the men start walking toward the plane. Slowly at first, then faster. They gather in a loose line, boots squelching in the mud, faces half hopeful, half afraid. The mail clerk climbs onto a crate, list in hand, and, for the next hour, the war disappears. Each name called is a small miracle. Each envelope handed over is a piece of a world they almost forgot existed. As the line stretches and the sun sinks lower, the air smells of dust, sweat, and something else, anticipation. The men wait quietly, listening for their names, because sometimes survival isn't about food or shelter or even luck. Sometimes it's about hearing your own name echo through the noise. And as the mail plane lands, they line up in silence, hoping to hear it. When a letter finally arrives, it feels like holding a piece of another planet, one that still spins on its own schedule, far away from mud, sweat, and gun oil. The envelopes are fragile from the journey. The corners bent, the paper soft and slightly translucent from humidity. The ink sometimes runs, but the words always make it through. They're messages from a world that hasn't stopped for war, even if the men reading them have. The topics are ordinary, wonderfully so.
That's what makes them precious.
One letter might talk about the weather back home, a cold winter in Ohio, a heat wave in Kansas, a spring thaw in Vermont. Another describes a neighbor's new car, or a cousin's wedding, or a baseball game the writer swears was the best you ever missed. There's a comfort in that mundanity. After days of patrols and weeks without mail, a paragraph about rainfall in Indiana feels like poetry. One Marine reads aloud from his letter. Your dad says the tomatoes came in early this year. His buddies laugh, but they're listening. They'd give anything to see those tomatoes, to smell something that isn't salt or mildew. Food, sports, gossip. The letters are small snapshots of a life that used to feel boring and now feels impossible. A mother writes about rationing, about how sugar coupons are down to half, how she's saving bacon grease for frying. A brother brags about getting a new job at the shipyard. A wife writes about neighbors painting their picket fence white again, even though paint is nearly impossible to find. Every letter is a reminder that normal life is still out there, waiting. Of course, the letters aren't all the same. Some come full of love and humor. Others carry silence between the lines, the kind of quiet that says more than words ever could. A few are marked, "Return to Sender." Those hurt the most, and then there are the Dear John letters. The ones no one wants to talk about. The camp has its own unspoken system for handling them. When someone gets one, the others give him space.
No teasing, no questions, just quiet understanding.
You see the guy walk off toward the edge of camp, the envelope crushed in his hand, the look on his face blank but distant. He'll be back later, acting fine, but the change is permanent. The war doesn't need to kill him, that letter already did a piece of the job. The mail sensors, of course, read everything before it reaches the island. Every line is scanned for military details, coordinates, anything that could give away a position. Soldiers know this, so they write around it. The weather's still hot becomes code for we're still here. The boys are doing fine means we lost someone, but I can't say who. It's an unspoken dance of half-truths and omissions, both sides pretending the other doesn't notice. Censorship goes both ways. The men censor themselves too.
They don't want to worry anyone back home.
They write that they're healthy, that the food's good, that spirits are high. They mention the sunsets, the camaraderie, even the local wildlife, which is usually code for the rats in their tents. They rarely mention fear. They almost never mention death. Private Walter Skinner, 129th Infantry, wrote home, "You'd be proud of how well everyone's holding up." The guys are in good spirits. His diary, found later, tells a different story. Half the platoon has malaria. The other half can't sleep. Both were true in their own way. Letters are read again and again. Some men fold them into wallets, others keep them in pockets close to their hearts until the paper wears thin. They pull them out before night patrols or after long marches, or in the few quiet minutes before sleep. The paper softens, the creases tear, but no one throws them away. They become part of the uniform. Reading isn't always solitary. Some letters are too good not to share. A guy from Boston gets one describing a Red Sox win. He reads the whole thing aloud like it's breaking news. Another reads his girlfriend's baking recipe, though no one here has an oven. Laughter spreads through the camp, light but genuine. You can tell a lot about a man by how he reads his mail. Some tear it open right away, reading hungrily. Others hold on to it for hours, savoring the anticipation.
A few never open theirs at all, at least not right away.
They keep it tucked in a pocket, unopened, just knowing it's there, proof that someone still remembers them. V-mail adds a strange layer of intimacy to all this. The letters, photographed onto film and reprinted in miniature, arrive shrunken and delicate. The handwriting becomes tiny but personal, each loop and curve of a letter preserved like a fingerprint.
Men squint in the dim light, tracing their fingers over the faint words, as if touching them could bring the writer closer. There's something almost sacred about the moment after a man finishes reading.
He sits quietly, staring at the page. Around him, the camp hums on men laughing, generators buzzing, distant waves breaking, but for him, the world has narrowed to that small square of paper. Some letters end with signatures that make the men smile. Love,
Mom, always Mary. Write when you can. Simple word.
But they mean everything. At night, when the camp grows quiet, you can see the faint glow of flashlights under mosquito nets, little pockets of light where men are writing back. The scratch of pencils mixes with the sounds of the jungle. Each one tries to find the right words, the ones that say, "I'm okay," without lying. It's harder than it looks. The act of writing becomes its own therapy. You focus on the page, on the slow drag of pencil across paper, and for a while, the rest fades. You remember what it feels like to be part of the world beyond the war. You imagine someone opening this letter weeks from now, smiling at your words, maybe reading them aloud in a kitchen thousands of miles away. One soldier writes, "Tell the kids I'm still taller than the jungle trees." Another signs off, "Don't worry, we're making do." Every line is a quiet promise that they'll come home, that this won't last forever. By morning, the letters will be sealed, dropped into the canvas mailbag,
and carried away by someone who probably won't even know what's inside.
But for the men who wrote them, the act itself is enough. Writing is a way of saying, "I still exist." And as the sun sets again over the Pacific, the smell of ink and paper lingers faintly in the warm air. Someone's letter has perfume on it, just a trace, barely noticeable, but real enough to remind everyone of a world that still smells like soap. flowers, and rain. A torn envelope from Iowa passes from hand to hand, faintly scented, fragile from the journey. It smells like everything they've been fighting to get back to a reminder of a world impossibly far away. Long after the mail plane leaves and the letters are read, the real magic begins, the quiet ritual of keeping them alive. You'd think paper wouldn't stand a chance in a place like this. The air on Bougainville never truly dries, and ink bleeds faster than wounds. But somehow the soldiers find ways to make their letters last. Each one becomes a kind of relic, folded, patched, and refolded until it's as soft as cloth. Some men slip them into wax paper wrappers scavenged from ration packs to keep them dry. Others tuck them into empty tins that once held cigarettes or candy. Those tins, dented and dull, become treasure chests. Inside them are pieces of lives waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. Wedding announcements, photographs, children's drawings, and words written in careful, hopeful ink. Marine Private Joe Foss once wrote in his diary about how the men treated letters like artifacts. "The guys here protect paper like it's gold," he said. "We keep them in our helmets, in our boots."
Anywhere that stays close. Foss described one corporal who laminated a letter from his wife with candle wax,
holding it over the flame just long enough to melt a thin coat that sealed it against the rain. He almost set it on fire, Foss wrote, but he said it was worth the risk. In war, paper shouldn't survive, but somehow it does, stubborn and soft, creased and loved. The act of rereading becomes a daily habit. After evening chow, you'll see men sitting alone or in small groups, heads bent, eyes scanning the same words for the 100th time. They mouth the sentences silently as if reciting prayers. Some even memorize entire paragraphs. "I know every loop of her handwriting," one private wrote home. "I could trace it blindfolded. There's comfort in repetition." The same words read 100 times start to sound different, not because they change, but because the reader does. What was once a cheerful update becomes a promise. What was once a joke becomes an echo of home. The letters become less about information and more about memory, reminders that somewhere normal life continues. Sharing mail is common. When someone doesn't get a letter, someone else usually steps in. "Here, read mine," a buddy will say, passing over a note from a sister or a friend.
It doesn't matter that it's not addressed to them.
For a few minutes they borrow someone else's world, the voice of a stranger describing the smell of rain on pavement, the taste of coffee from a real cup, the sound of church bells on a Sunday morning. The men know it's an illusion, but it helps. Words are warmth out here, and no one hoards warmth. There's a quiet generosity to it, this act of sharing words. One Marine from the 1st Division wrote, "When I read a letter aloud, everyone listens. When I finish, they all thank me like I wrote it myself." Sometimes the letters get lost to rain, to mold, to careless moments. Those losses hurt more than any missing piece of gear. "It's like losing a part of yourself," one soldier said. Paper's gone, but the words stay burned in your head. You remember every one of them, and then there are the letters that never come. The men try not to talk about those. When weeks stretch into months, the silence becomes heavy. Some joke about it to hide the sting.
Guess the post office ran out of stamps, but
everyone knows the truth that not every silence can be explained by bad weather. The psychology of it all is something the army never quite
understood, but the soldiers did.
Letters were more than morale boosters. They were lifelines. They provided continuity, a thread, connecting the mud-soaked present to the life that existed before. Each envelope was proof that someone remembered you, that you weren't just a name on a roster or a dot on a map. The chaplain on Bougainville wrote in his own notes that mail keeps men believing in a future. He wasn't being poetic. The statistics backed him up. Soldiers who received regular letters showed fewer signs of depression, fewer disciplinary issues, and higher re-enlistment rates. Hope, it turned out, could be delivered by mailbag. Some men created elaborate systems for organizing their letters,
folded by date,
tied with twine, labeled in pencil, home, family, sweetheart. A few carried entire bundles in their packs, even on patrol. They didn't read them every day, just knowing they were there was enough, like carrying a bit of home in your pocket. Others kept a single letter, worn and fading, as their constant companion. The edges frayed, the ink smeared, but it still lived in their breast pocket close to the heart, literally and symbolically. One Marine told a reporter years later, "That letter was my lucky charm. It could survive the jungle, so could I." The war ended, eventually, as all wars do. The camps cleared, the uniforms were packed away, and the letters, those fragile little anchors, went home with the men. Some tucked them into drawers, others pressed them into photo albums, and a few left them sealed in the same tins that crossed the ocean. When historians found them decades later, the paper was yellowed and brittle, but the ink still legible. The words still carried the same warmth. Some of the envelopes still smelled faintly of salt and mildew. You could almost feel the humid air clinging to them, as if the jungle never quite let go. Veterans who lived through Bougainville, Guadalcanal, and New Georgia often said the letters mattered more than medals. "You can't pin comfort to your chest," one wrote. "You can only hold it in your hands." In reunions years later, they'd pull the letters out of boxes and pass them around again, grey-haired men reading lines written in their 20s, their voices trembling but fond. Some laughed, some cried, but all agreed on one thing. The words had survived everything. The paper outlasted the tents, the rifles, even the memory of the fights. It outlasted fear. It outlasted time, and perhaps that's what made them so sacred, that something so fragile could endure what even steel could not. Because in the end, wars don't live on in gunfire or medals or strategy. They live in the small things that survive in ink, pressed into paper, in words written by hands that shook with fatigue, in the human instinct to reach out across distance and say, "I'm still here." Even decades later, veterans would say the same thing with quiet certainty, that the letters outlasted the battles. Paper memories of survival, still whispering long after the guns went silent. The day on a Pacific base doesn't begin with reveille or gunfire. It begins with coffee, before the sun rises, before the engines start, before the first patrol even stirs somewhere near the edge of camp. A handful of men are already awake, standing over stoves that glow faintly orange in the dark. They're the mess crew, and while no one writes songs about them, they're the first heartbeat of every morning in the Pacific. It's 4:30 a.m. on Bougainville. 1944, the jungle is still wrapped in shadow, the air thick and damp. A few tents away, most soldiers are still half dreaming under mosquito nets. But in the mess area, the crew moves like clockwork. They've learned to work quietly, boots squelching in the mud, voices low, utensils clinking softly against metal. The camp's waking world begins here. They're not cooks in the restaurant sense. These men didn't volunteer for culinary duty, they were volunteered. The Army's definition of a cook is anyone who can tell when water boils and hasn't burned a tent down yet. But over time, they become experts. Not in fine dining, but in the delicate art of feeding 400 hungry, overworked soldiers 3 times a day with ingredients that barely qualify as food. The day's rations came off a cargo ship 2 nights ago. Tins of corned beef, sacks of flour, powdered eggs, canned peaches, and enough Spam to build a small fortress. The crates are stacked neatly under a tarp, guarded less for security and more for rats. The Pacific has a way of turning every food supply into a wildlife buffet if you're not careful. The crew moves fast. One man fires up the field stove's makeshift contraptions built from 55-gallon fuel drums cut in half, balanced on bricks, and fueled with gasoline. The smell of burning fuel mixes with salt air and damp earth. Another starts mixing powdered eggs in a bucket, stirring with a stick. The texture isn't quite right, and the color is somewhere between beige and confusion, but it'll do. Coffee, though coffee is sacred, every mess crewman knows that the first pot of the day decides the mood of the camp. The beans, when they get real ones, are ground and brewed in bulk, black, strong, and bitter enough to wake the dead.
On most days, though, it's instant powder mixed with boiled rainwater.
They still call it coffee because there's no better word for it. The Pacific blend, one Marine calls it, tastes like the war. By 5 a.m. the smells begin to spread. Even half-asleep soldiers can find the mess tent by scent alone, coffee, grease, and a faint sweetness from the canned fruit syrup being warmed in a pot. The mess area isn't fancy. A few canvas roofs stretched between poles, wooden tables scavenged from shipping crates, and a serving line made from sandbags and metal trays. But it's the one place everyone passes through. The menu doesn't change much. Breakfast is powdered eggs, canned meat, and toast if the bread hasn't molded. Sometimes there's oatmeal, sometimes biscuits, but always Spam fried, sliced, diced, sometimes even grilled on skewers when the crew feels creative. One morning, a corporal decides to carve US into each Spam slice with a knife, calling it branding for morale. Nobody laughs, but everyone eats. By now, the cooks have been awake for 2 hours, covered in sweat and soot. Their shirts cling to their backs and their hands smell like grease and fuel.
But there's pride in what they do.
In a war where most jobs are about destruction, theirs is about creation turning raw, unpromising ingredients into something that keeps men moving. Sergeant Thomas Red Halpern, head cook for the 108nd Infantry, once said, "We fed them, they fought." Simple as that. He wasn't wrong. Food was more than nourishment. It was routine, reassurance, and morale served on a tray. By 5:45, the first pots are ready.
Huge metal vats of eggs and meat sit bubbling on the stoves, each one stirred with what looks suspiciously like a broom handle.
Tin mugs are lined up in rows, ready for the morning's first pour. The cooks move in practiced rhythm scoop, stir, ladle, repeat. The kitchen hums like a factory. The sun begins to rise, a dull red smear over the horizon. The camp stirs.
A few soldiers wander in early, bleary-eyed, still buttoning their shirts.
They stand near the mess tent, drawn by the smell of coffee, watching the crew work.
One of them mumbles, "You guys are heroes." The cook doesn't look up.
"Not before caffeine we ain't," he mutters. There's humour in the mess line, always. The jokes are bad, the coffee worse, but laughter travels well in the tropics. A private complains that the eggs taste like cardboard, and a cook replies, "That's because I ran out of cardboard." Someone else asks if there's any milk, and the cook waves the powdered kind. "Sure thing. Just don't breathe while you drink it." The men eat standing up, balancing trays on one hand, tin cups in the other. The chatter is low, voices gravelly from sleep. For a few minutes the war feels suspended. There's no rank here, just hungry people and the men who feed them. Outside the jungle hums to life. Birds begin their morning songs, insects buzz, and somewhere in the distance an engine coughs awake. The air grows brighter, the shadows shorter. The mess crew moves through it all with practiced efficiency, cleaning trays, stoking fires, starting the next batch. They'll do it again for lunch, then dinner, every single day. In the background you can hear the rhythmic clank of utensils, the hiss of boiling water, and the faint bubbling of Spam frying on steel. It's not a glamorous soundtrack, but it's comforting, steady, familiar, alive. Feeding hundreds of men 3 times a day in these conditions is an act of quiet heroism. The stoves break, the rain pours, supplies run short, but somehow there's always food. The cooks adapt. They improvise. They turn flour into pancakes when there's no bread, use rainwater when the tanks run dry, and steal a few coconuts from the edge of the jungle for dessert. It's messy, loud, sweaty work. But in its own strange way, it's sacred too. Because before dawn every morning, while the rest of the camp still dreams of home, a handful of men make sure the day starts with warmth, food, and that one smell everyone recognizes: burnt, bitter, beautiful coffee. And as the first soldiers shuffle in, boots dragging, helmets askew, the mess crew stands ready behind their serving line. The war hasn't started for the day yet, but breakfast has. The first soldiers shuffle in half awake, and for now the smell of coffee is their only luxury. The funny thing about war is that everyone remembers the food, or more accurately, the lack of it. Ask any veteran what Guadalcanal or Bougainville was really like, and they'll tell you it wasn't the gunfire that got to them. It was the meals. Feeding an army in a tropical jungle wasn't just difficult, it was a logistical nightmare. Every can of beans, every sack of flour, every crate of powdered milk had to travel thousands of miles across an ocean, crawling with submarines, through monsoons, heat, and humidity that could spoil almost anything. By the time it reached the islands, even the rats looked skeptical. The army called it subsistence logistics. The soldiers called it whatever hasn't gone bad yet. Let's start with the basics, the rations. The military divided its meals into neat categories: K rations, C rations, and the catch-all field expedient meals, which usually meant figure it out. K rations were designed for mobility lightweight, compact boxes containing 3 meals: breakfast, dinner, and supper. Each box included tinned meat, biscuits, powdered drink mix, gum, and something loosely referred to as dessert. In theory, they provided about 3,000 calories a day. In practice, most of that came from the chocolate bar. The breakfast unit might contain processed cheese and a packet of instant coffee. Dinner was often canned meat and crackers. Supper, if you could call it that, might feature meat and vegetable hash, a tin of fruit, and powdered lemonade that could strip paint. The joke among Marines was that K stood for killer, as in what it did to your appetite. Then there were the C rations, the luxury option. Each can held a hot meal, or at least a lukewarm one, if you had time to heat it. C rations included stew, spaghetti, beans with bacon, or ham and eggs, which were, by unanimous agreement, worse than combat. They were heavier than K rations, but they felt like real food. If you were lucky enough to eat C rations, you knew someone in supply liked you. The trouble wasn't the rations themselves, it was keeping them edible. Tropical heat worked faster than any enemy. Cans rusted, flour grew mold, and sugar turned into solid bricks. Refrigeration was a dream. Even cold storage meant burying things under wet sand or dunking them in streams. The mess crew learned to store supplies wherever nature cooperated. Oil drums turned into pantries, crates stacked under tarps, cans buried beneath palm leaves to stay cool. It didn't always work. There's a reason the phrase tropical rot shows up so often in diaries. Bread spoiled in hours. Milk curdled on the march, from ship to camp. Even tinned goods sometimes failed, hissing when opened a bad sign everyone ignored, until someone inevitably regretted it. Food was more than nutrition here, it was currency. Units bartered constantly, trading rations like Wall Street brokers, coffee for cigarettes, canned fruit for soap, chocolate for anything. The Seabees, construction battalions, often had the best deals thanks to their access to naval shipments. If you wanted something special like butter or fresh fruit, you'd better know a Seabee. One soldier wrote home, "We don't have an economy here. We have a black market made of peaches." The barter system wasn't officially sanctioned, but the officers turned a blind eye. Morale mattered more than regulation. A lucky trade could mean a small miracle, real sugar, a tin of pineapple, or, once in a blue moon, a loaf of bread that didn't come from a can. Meanwhile, the heat did its best to make eating feel optional. The air was thick, the humidity constant, and appetites disappeared somewhere between the mosquitoes and the smell of diesel. Soldiers lost weight without trying, sweating more calories than they consumed. Medical officers warned about malnutrition, but there wasn't much to do. You can't fight humidity with discipline. Then there was malaria.
It didn't just weaken the body, it wrecked the appetite.
The quinine tablets helped, but the taste was so bitter that even the bravest men hesitated. Some joked that the medicine was worse than the disease. The mess crew mixed the powder into fruit juice to make it tolerable, but no one was fooled. Still, the mess crew did their best to keep meals interesting. Variety wasn't on the menu, but improvisation was. When supplies ran low, they invented new recipes. Spam stew, coffee-flavored rice, jungle pancakes made with powdered eggs, flour, and questionable optimism. The men teased the cooks mercilessly, but they ate every bite. Hunger makes even the impossible edible. Sometimes the cooks got creative in other ways. They learned to bake using oil drums and makeshift ovens built from old airplane parts. A few even managed to roast breadfruit from the jungle or fry fish caught off the beach. These small acts of culinary rebellion were victories, a reminder that not everything had to taste like salt and tedium. The smell of cooking carried far beyond the camp, blending with the heavy scent of palm and smoke. Even when the food wasn't good, the smell was comforting. It meant routine. It meant safety, however temporary. When shipments were delayed, which happened often, everyone tightened their belts. Rations were halved. Coffee ran out. Cigarettes disappeared. The mess crew got the blame, though it wasn't their fault. One diary entry from 1943 reads, "The cooks must think we're birds. Breakfast was one biscuit and air, but the crew never stopped trying. They patched leaking cans, wiped off mold, salvaged what they could. Every meal they produced was a small defiance against the jungle's attempt to reclaim everything. And then, every once in a while, something miraculous happened. A supply ship arrived on time. The Navy would send a small landing craft ashore, carrying crates of fresh produce, or, if fortune smiled, bread. Real, soft, white bread, the kind that squishes when you hold it, the kind that smells like home. When that happened, word spread like wildfire. The entire camp would turn up at the mess line early, trays in hand, grinning like kids on Christmas morning. It didn't matter what else was served: canned stew, watery coffee, powdered eggs. That bread turned the meal into a feast. Some men tore into it immediately. Others held it close for a moment, breathing in the smell, savoring it. One Marine said later, that loaf of bread was worth more than gold. You could taste civilization again. And just like that, for a brief butterless moment, the Pacific didn't feel so far from home. When a crate of fresh bread arrived from a Navy ship, it wasn't just food, it was hope. And for a few hours, hope was enough. There's a rhythm to life in war that has nothing to do with fighting. It's built around meals: breakfast, lunch, dinner. The 3 moments a day when the world briefly feels predictable. No matter how chaotic the jungle gets, no matter how loud the night becomes, everyone knows that at some point there will be food. It might be cold, it might come from a can, but it will be there. And that small certainty is what holds the edges of sanity together. For the mess crew, the day never really ends. It just resets. The same pattern repeats: fire up the stoves, stir the pots, ladle the portions, clean, and start again. It's monotonous, backbreaking, and endless, but it's also what keeps everyone going. There's pride in the mess tent. It's quiet, unsung pride, the kind that comes from knowing that while others fight with rifles, you fight with spoons and timing. Sergeant Howard Randall, who ran the mess operations for the 43rd Infantry Division, once wrote in his logbook, "If we do our job right, no one notices. If we mess up, everyone remembers." He had a point. Randall's log entries are a masterpiece of understated humor. Rain again today. Bread dough won't rise. Men complain coffee too weak.
Added more powder.
Now they complain too strong. Conclusion: problem not with coffee. The mess crew worked miracles daily. They built ovens out of oil drums, turned fuel cans into fryers, and baked pies using condensed milk and crushed crackers. On Christmas Eve, 1943, Randall managed to produce an actual holiday dinner on Tarawa roast pork, rehydrated potatoes, fruit salad, and something resembling pie. He wrote, "Men happy. Wish we had more fruit, or less war." That meal became legendary in the division. Some men swore it was the best meal they ever had. Not because of the flavor, it probably tasted like victory ration and salt, but because it reminded them that even in the middle of nowhere, someone cared enough to make it special. Food, in those moments, became more than sustenance. It was communication. A plate of hot stew meant someone had woken up early, fought the rain, and kept the fire burning for you. A mug of lukewarm coffee meant you weren't forgotten. Shared meals built quiet bonds. Around the long tables, or more often logs and overturned crates, men laughed, traded stories, and complained together. Complaining was its own kind of camaraderie. Everyone hated the food equally, and somehow that made it better. Dinner conversations were less about the food and more about life. Someone might tell a story about home, the time he burned his mother's kitchen trying to fry bacon, or how his dad insisted oatmeal built character. The others listened, half laughing, half remembering. And then there were the jokes, endless, recycled, and terrible.
"This stew tastes like the enemy surrendered in it," someone would mutter.
Or, "I'd ask for seconds, but I'm afraid I'll get them." The cooks fired back with their own lines. You want fine dining? Enlist in the Navy. It was humor without bite away to make the unbearable tolerable. Evenings were the best time. The heat softened, the bugs settled a little, and the air filled with the smell of smoke and salt. Men lingered around the mess tent longer than necessary, tin mugs in hand, soaking in the faint illusion of normal life. For a few minutes they weren't soldiers, They were just people sharing a meal. The mess crew took their work seriously, even when no one else noticed. They organized schedules with military precision, tracking every ration, every can, every ounce of fuel. Randall's logs show how methodical it all was. Food supply reports, temperature notes, weather complaints disguised as data. He wasn't just recording meals, he was recording morale. On the worst days, when the rain wouldn't stop, when supplies ran out, when the air raid sirens interrupted dinner, the cooks didn't quit. They kept stirring. A pot of soup could survive almost anything. The men could too. It's easy to underestimate what food meant out there. In a world where nothing stayed dry or clean, a warm meal was stability. The act of eating at the same time each day gave structure to a life otherwise dictated by chaos. It told the body you're still here. The Navy occasionally sent small luxuries, tins of peaches, powdered cocoa, even real butter, once in a blue moon. When those arrived, the whole camp lit up.
Someone would shout, "Fresh fruit tonight."
And the line for dinner would double in size. You'd think they were giving away gold. Holidays hit hardest. Christmas, Thanksgiving, even New Year's, they reminded everyone how far from home they really were. The mess crew went above and beyond on those days. Candles made from wax drippings, palm fronds as decorations, tables scrubbed until the wood shone. For one evening, the jungle became a dining room. On Tarawa, 1943, Sergeant Randall wrote, "Cooked ham, mashed potatoes, pineapple rings, coffee with sugar." Men sang carols. Some cried. Not a bad Christmas. It wasn't the food that made it memorable, it was the feeling. The ritual of sitting together, of pausing the war long enough to taste something warm and familiar, became a kind of therapy. Even years later, veterans would talk about the mess tent like it was a sacred place. Not because the meals were good, they almost never were, but because that's where the routine lived. That's where the rhythm of existence stayed steady, even when everything else broke apart. For the mess crew, the work didn't end with peace. When the fighting quieted, they still cooked for the wounded, for the weary, for the rebuilding. Randall's last entry after the surrender of Japan was short and simple. Served coffee, men quiet. Didn't taste the same. The war ended, but the memories stayed steeped in the smell of smoke, grease, and tin cups. The mess tents came down, the stoves went cold, but the bond they built around those meals never dissolved. Some veterans later said they couldn't remember the taste of victory, but they could remember the taste of breakfast. The warmth of a tin cup in their hands, the chatter of friends over stew, the clatter of spoons against metal trays while rain drummed softly on the canvas overhead. Food, after all, was never just food. It was routine, resilience, and humanity, all served in one steaming, imperfect bowl. And long after the war, when those men grew old and told their stories, they always mentioned the same two things, the coffee and the rain. Many said they could still recall both the bitter, comforting taste of lukewarm coffee and the gentle rhythm of rain on canvas roofs.